You are now listening to Asking for a Friend with TalkDoc, sharing insights through real, honest, and practical ways to improve your communication and relationships. Featuring your hosts, Dr. Pamela Kreiser, Meredith Edwards-Nagel, and Taylor Polindo.
Welcome back, everyone. We are here on Asking for a Friend with TalkDoc with a special guest, Marissa Cirbo. Welcome, Marissa.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm a big fan of the show and a big fan of Dr. K, so I'm thrilled to be here.
I personally know Marissa as I have been a mentor to her for many years, and we have a great friendship. And I wanted to invite you, Marissa, onto the podcast so that we could learn and benefit from the life experience that you've had regarding chronic illness. And so what we want to begin with is just have you tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for putting a spotlight on this. March is actually MS Awareness Month, and I was diagnosed with MS in 2022. It was a complete whirlwind, completely out of the blue. My family and I were on a trip to Mexico, and we came back, and I was dehydrated naturally. When you're in Mexico, you're drinking all the tequila, having a good time. And I started having really weird symptoms on the right side of my body. I had numbness and tingling from my right hand all the way to my shoulder. And then I couldn't feel my foot all the way up to my knee. And I was kind of like, this is strange, but it's probably, I don't know, a weird symptom from overdoing it in Mexico. Little backstory, my husband is a physical therapist. So he starts doing all of these differential diagnosis tests on me because I'm starting to be like, I really don't feel good. I feel unbalanced. The numbness is not going away. I'm having a hard time picking up my phone, and it just started getting worse no matter how much I was hydrating. Anyways, all that to say, it started our medical maze of figuring out that I have MS. And so that was obviously shocking. I'm the first and only person in my family to be diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and I'm just learning how to navigate it. And I'm pretty fresh and new in this diagnosis process, having it be just 2 years ago, but I've found myself become really passionate about what can I do in this space for advocacy and research and just continuing to live my life in spite of this beast, because I'm not going to let it stop me, but it definitely sucks. So that's where I'm at.
So when you were experiencing the tingling and the early symptoms, we hear this a lot from women that they try to talk themselves out of the physiological symptoms. Would you say you were trying to do that? Is it like that?
100%. It's funny you say that because I remember I was texting my sister and she was like, that's really weird. I was like, do you feel weird after Mexico? Is this just me? And she was like, that's really weird. Like, probably you're just dehydrated. So yeah, I mean, for a good 2 days, I was talking myself out of symptoms. I'm a photographer and I was supposed to be photographing an event, but my hands were still numb and I couldn't pick up my phone. And I was like, this is strange. I'm sure I'll gain feeling and sensation back in 24 hours. I'm going to keep hydrating. One of my nurse friends was like, you're probably having like a potassium situation. Eat some bananas.
It always comes back to the banana. Doesn't it always come back to the banana? So we have this on the heart attack episode where Stacey Ross thought she had a potassium problem. So she Instacarted some bananas.
Yes, I had Brandon, my husband. I was like, I need bananas and I need electrolytes and water, and I'm going to get my sensation back. And so then I'm starting to get a little panicked because I'm doing all the things and nothing's working. And then Brandon, my husband, was a little concerned that it had been 48 hours of symptoms and nothing was subsiding. And he's a physical therapist, so he started doing some balance tests on me. And I will not demonstrate for you because it was embarrassing, but I was wobbling and I looked drunk. And he said to me, are you being serious right now? And I said, no, I'm dead serious. I can't balance on my right foot. And he thought I was messing with him. And he was like, okay. He said, babe, this is out of my scope. This is neurological. And so, of course, he says that. And I just start spiraling because I'm like, oh my God, am I having a stroke? I am so numb. So I couldn't drive. I could barely cook and lift things. And so we ended up going to the ER and they actually misdiagnosed me originally They did an MRI without contrast. And so they misdiagnosed me with worms in my brain because they really held on to the fact that I was in Mexico eating street food. And so they said, you were eating a lot of pork. You were in Mexico. There's this really rare pork parasite called neurocystic sarcosis. We're seeing a bunch of spots on your brain that are consistent with worms. So at that point, I am just disgusted. I'm like, what the heck? I have worms in my brain. It happened that quickly. Like I was just in Mexico a week ago.
Oh my gosh.
And my mom, my aunt, a bunch of folks, they're all in the medical field. They're like, this doesn't make sense. There's no way you have worms in your brain that quickly. And so that kind of started the journey of really advocating for myself and communicating and over communicating with doctors to say, I'm not really going to accept this diagnosis. It sounds completely outrageous. They started putting me on medications for parasites. It wasn't working. I was getting worse. And that's when we were like, I need another MRI. And so we did a second MRI and I knew something was a little fishy because they comped it and nobody gets a free MRI. And sure enough, they end up calling us on July 19th. I'll never forget it. And they said, we need you and bring a family member to come into the office to review your results. And I just had the biggest hit in my stomach. I just knew something was off. And so my husband and I went, and sure enough, they said, we misdiagnosed you. We're deeply sorry. Your results are consistent with multiple sclerosis. We advise that you get a second opinion because we specialize in Parkinson's and other neurological disorders. And I just fully blacked out. I refused to accept it. I was like, you're kidding me. I want the worms back. The worms were temporary. I was getting attached to that diagnosis because I was like, there's no way this is my reality. And it was just honestly the worst day of my life. It really set my life into motion of AD and BD, like before diagnosis and after. And it's taken a lot of work to get to a place of acceptance.
Oh, so you said you blacked out, which you don't mean literally, but just emotionally flooded.
I was so flooded. I had the cold sweats come over me and I just kept saying, what do you mean? What do you mean? And my husband's like holding my hand and he has patients with multiple sclerosis. So he's very familiar with it. At this point, I have no idea what MS is. I just know Selma Blair has MS and that she's very progressed. And I just immediately felt like I'm going to be in a wheelchair. My body went fully numb. And at that point, I'm still numb. I still have the numbness and tingling. But at that point, it was like panic symptoms. And I would say I was coherent. I didn't actually black out, but I was emotionally flooded.
And so you have this diagnosis, something you're not familiar with. Maybe share with our audience what multiple sclerosis is.
Yeah. So multiple sclerosis is a complex disease of the central nervous system. The way it was described to me is imagine the nerves in your brain as like electrical wires, and the immune system is damaging those wires, causing that protective covering to deteriorate. And so the signals between your brain and your spinal cord and your body get disrupted and cause symptoms. They call it the snowflake disease because every person has a different experience with the disease.
The snowflake idea is that everyone has a different presentation of the symptoms. Is that how we mean that? Each snowflake is unique. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
And so the thing I was thinking about in researching for this, I was thinking it's a communication problem inside your body, basically, right? Between the brain and the muscles and the nerves.
Right. The communication between the brain and the body is disrupted. And so that presents in both visible and invisible symptoms. My symptoms initially were all invisible. It presents different in everyone based on where your lesions are located. Most of my symptoms are numbness, tingling, fatigue, terrible brain fog, and pain, just pain all over, learning to manage that as well.
Do the lesions change or do they stay the same?
That's a great question. They actually can shrink and calcify. And I'm on a treatment. It's an infusion every 6 months. And it just helps to reduce your B cell count because those are the cells that are attacking your myelin sheath in your brain. And so it completely wipes my immune system. I'm considered immunosuppressed, but my doctors and care team really wanted to hit the disease hard out the gate since I'm so young. And it was kind of a miracle. After my first set of infusions, they saw that my lesions had shrunk by 50%. So
Wow.
that's possible. It's not always the case, but I feel really lucky that I responded really well to the treatment.
Does that translate into having 50% less symptoms?
Exactly. So I still sometimes has the numbness and tingling. It comes and goes, but I have full sensation in my hands and feet again. And what I was experiencing, my onset of symptoms in July of 2022, that's what they consider a flare-up. So it was a perfect storm of stress, dehydration, my body just signaling to me, slow down, what's going on? Your nervous system is in overdrive, and presented this diagnosis. I think I probably have had MS since 2015. When I look back in retrospect, I notice a ton of symptoms that I dismissed, thinking it's anxiety. It's just being a woman, because unfortunately, MS mimics a lot of PMS symptoms and also menopause. So being a woman is fun.
You talked about it being a maze. You call it a medical maze that you were navigating. So was that simply because you didn't have any information about the disease, or was it because of the diagnosis problem?
Both. Being diagnosed with a brain-eating parasite was so scary. And then having to shift gears and say, oh no, this isn't curable. This is actually a chronic lifetime situation. And I think for me, I really value having the right doctors and specialists around me. And so having to navigate, okay, who are the best doctors in this space? Who's doing the most research, cutting edge? Like, I want it all. I want to know how I can manage this and live my life and thrive, you know? So for me, that medical maze, it was all hands on deck. And I'm so thankful for my family. I will never forget. We found out that I was, likely diagnosed with MS. They said to get a few other opinions. And I called my parents and I said, Brandon and I have some news. We need to come over now. And my mom was like, is everything okay? And I said, no, but can you please call Aunt Teresa over? And she's my aunt who's a nurse. And I will never forget walking in and I see my parents, I'm weeping. And then my aunt runs in straight out of the shower. Her hair is wet. She has her laptop and she is just ready to look at my MRIs, to start researching with us. It was like, I felt so loved in that moment, but I was so devastated. But the way my family and my husband and my siblings, the way everyone showed up, I felt very carried and supported, but it was terrifying being able to navigate that with loved ones who were like, we're going to figure this out. We're going to research. We're going to get you in with the best doctors, whatever it takes. And so that maze was, I look back and I was like, it felt like a fever dream.
What were some things that the people in your circle, how did they love you well in a moment like that? For people listening that have someone in their life, how can you show up for somebody in that moment or these years?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, it was just listening and being there and supporting me and just saying, we're with you in this. We don't have the answers, but we want to learn alongside you. They weren't overwhelming me with questions because I was figuring it out as I went through this diagnosis. So just kind of sitting in the uncomfortable grief with me, because it was a grieving process. I think I went through all 5 stages of grief, like every day for 3 months, because I just could not believe what was happening. Meals, our friends and family were bringing meals because, like I said, when I had my flare up, my body and my immune system was so inflamed that I couldn't get rid of the numbness and tingling until I got on treatment. And it's pretty tough to navigate and get your insurance to approve treatment initially. I was numb for a good couple weeks and I couldn't cook. I couldn't drive. And walking my dog was hard because I was feeling really off balance. And so just having friends show up, family members show up with meals, driving me to appointments, walking our dog. When I say it was all hands on deck, I have a really hard time asking for help. And this was, Dr. K knows this about me. So
I might be similar.
I had to really push my control and say, I need help. I can't do this on my own. My employer was incredibly understanding and generous and accommodating. And I took a 6-week leave of absence from work to just get myself better and with the right specialist so I could be on the right treatment, so I could get back on track. But yeah, I think that everyone really showed up in a way that was just supportive, and no one tried to fix it because there's no solution for this. It just is. And so everyone was just really present with me, crying with me. And I think that was all they could do.
Yeah. You sound very open about this. Do you tell people you have it? Do you hide it from some people? Like, how do you navigate that one?
Yeah.
I mean, you're on a podcast now, so some people might find out about it. But I'm just saying, initially, I think it might be tricky.
Yeah. I'm a very open person and I'm a verbal processor. So I was like telling everyone in my immediate circle, like close family and friends from the get-go, because we needed support. And we have a lot of family members in the medical field. And my parents were like, do we have your permission to ask this aunt, this uncle, this friend for recommendations for the right neurologist and specialists? So that's how we navigated it, was whoever I was most comfortable sharing with initially. And then my neurologist shared some resources with me through the National MS Society. And I got plugged into a support group and a community that a bunch of folks that also had MS. And I found it really helpful. And so I just thought, this is going to be a part of my life. It isn't my life and I'm not going to let it define me, but it's something I'm dealing with and I have to manage. And so if I can bring awareness to it or be a resource for someone who's newly diagnosed, because I had so many women come out of the woodworks who I didn't even know had MS, that were friends of friends or my aunt's best friend, and it was just like, what? And they were calling me and they've had it for 20 years. They've had it for 5 years. And they were able to just talk me off the ledge and say, you're going to be okay. It sucks. Feel it all right now, but just know you can still thrive with this. For me, I had to be open because I don't think I would have received those resources and the help that I got. But there are people that definitely don't want to share. And so I don't lead with it. I don't meet people and say, hello, I'm Marissa, I have MS. I think I did today on the podcast.
How has that openness that you have shaped your life professionally now? Or is it personally that's something that I hear that you do with people with similar diagnosis?
I'm open with all my photography clients. I'm open with my team at work. I work for a philanthropic consulting firm. We work with individuals, families, and foundations on their charitable giving. And so I'm in that line of work. So it felt very natural for me to share my story and also get involved in advocacy with the National MS Society. For me personally and professionally, I just felt like I couldn't hide this and I wanted to be open about it. And my team at work and all my family and friends, they've been so supportive. I last year did the bike MS ride and they all supported me and contributed to my fundraiser. And so it's been really awesome to see all my worlds come together to rally around me while I face this.
Sounds like you have a really amazing support system, but what do people do if they don't have that, or they're having people who just don't get it? Or are there times that people just said things that just really bothered you? Or how do you communicate on the other side of things if you don't have everyone just rallying behind you and doing all the things you want them to do?
For sure. Yeah. There's definitely been quite a few things that have been said. And I know that not everyone has this experience with the disease and with the support, like you said, but I would encourage people facing MS or any chronic illness to find people that are going through it because I've found so much comfort in relating to other women and men that have MS. You just understand each other and your day-to-day life challenges on a different level that sometimes family and friends and colleagues could not understand. Well, people are so supportive, they'll never get how we're feeling. And so if people are comfortable, I would advise getting plugged into some type of support group. I have found a lot of solace in Reddit. The MS Reddit and chronic illness Reddit space has so many supportive people all just talking about their experiences and encouraging each other. That's a more anonymous way to receive support and vent and communicate with others going through it. I think, did you ask there's things that people say that they shouldn't say?
That, or just how do you communicate your needs, I guess? It seems like something that unless you have it, you don't understand it. How do you help people understand or just communicate so that they can be the support that they want to be?
Yeah. I would say for me, like I said, initially it was all hands on deck, everyone really involved. Once I got a better grasp on what MS is and how I'm going to manage it, I would say boundaries are huge. I don't always want to talk about my disease. I don't always want to think about it. If I'm out having fun with friends, if it comes up naturally, great. But I don't want to be the Selma Blair of MS.
Yeah.
She's doing great. We'll leave her to be the spokeswoman. But I want to share my experience and have people be aware. And so I would say communicating with folks, letting them know that I'm really happy you're asking me about it. Thank you so much for caring. But yeah, I'm in a good place, and just having those scripts and answers to navigate it. I find that people don't really know what to say. A lot of times people say they're so sorry. There's nothing to be sorry about. There's nothing anyone could do to prevent it. This is a luck of the draw situation. Yeah.
Sounds like trial and error and practice.
Practice. Yeah. Yeah. But I would say boundaries and letting people know with my internal small group of core people that I tell everything to. I really try to communicate, hey, this is what's going on in my body today. And so if I'm appearing a little bit detached, or if I don't have that much energy, it's because I'm experiencing these symptoms. I don't want you to worry about me, but this is what's going on. Getting ahead of it and over communicating.
Yeah.
The word I keep thinking about is reality. This is a moment of reality that you have to live. So like you were describing, here's the symptom I have right now. That's what's going on.
Yeah.
And I thought I live not in reality as a person.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think that we really think that clearly about ourselves, our needs, our current capacity, what we want others to have permission to say to us or to understand about us. You're talking about the boundaries. And I thought, you live absolutely in reality. I'm not saying it's a reality you want, but
incredibly present in a way that I sometimes don't want to be. People always say, just be in the present, be in the present. I think like Ted Lasso's always, life's a gift. That's why they call it the present. And I yes, but
some of us have to speak that.
Present is not always pleasant. And it really is day by day. The symptoms with MS are so day by day. Everything affects it. I go to an event and I overexert myself. The fatigue comes over me like someone has cemented my legs to the ground, debilitating sometimes. Heat intolerance, that's a fun symptom. I can't be in climates that are too hot. So things like that, where I really have to think ahead, communicate ahead of time with loved ones. Hey, really want to go to that event. Sounds like it's going to be outside and there's no shade. I'm able to stay for an hour and a half before I'm going to have to do XYZ, find a better place, a better climate for myself. So it's made me a better communicator. It's made my husband and I more in tune.
Yeah. So talk about that a little bit, because you've been married, 5 years? I don't remember how long it's been. 5 years?
5 years.
So,
yeah.
Okay. Walk us through that before diagnosis, after diagnosis, your closest relationship.
Yeah. Before diagnosis, I think when you're married, you just expect your spouse to read your mind. Like, you should know how I'm feeling. And so At this point, I really need to communicate with him when I'm feeling a certain way. But he's gotten so much better at checking in with me about things because he's also living life through the lens of my wife is dealing with this and we are dealing with this together. And so I would say our communication has only gotten stronger. But there's times, right? Because he's a PT and I am literally his patient. There's times where it's like, I don't want to talk about this stuff. I don't want to feel like I'm your patient and burden you with that. And of course, he's such a fantastic partner. He would never say that I burden him. But yeah, I think for us, there's like a time and place to really communicate it. And so every week we go over our calendar, what events are coming up, go through, okay, how will this affect this? How long do we need to stay at the event? Will you be okay? Things like that. And then we have a shared note in our phone with all of the information about doctors and appointments. And he goes to my appointments and takes notes for me. And so it's helped me a lot. He carries that mental load with me. And I do not know what I would do without him. I just feel so blessed to have a partner who gets it. And it's just so crazy because we got married 5 years ago and obviously I did not have MS. And the number one specialists they say that you should have are neurologists and physical therapists. And so the fact that I married a PT is just serendipitous, God at work, just incredible.
Yeah. So we joke on the podcast of whose husband wins the episode. And I feel like your husband's clearly winning this episode. So shout out to you.
You know, sounds like the golden standard of a husband who shows up for you and helps you. But then what is that like being his wife's help? How has that been for you? Then have you had moments of that, like not wanting him to help you all the time, or has that been difficult to ask for that help sometimes from him? What is that like within the marriage?
That's a great question. Yeah, he's incredibly helpful, but there are times where I want to have my independence. I want to still help him and contribute to the household in ways that I don't feel like he has to carry all that because we're carrying this mental load together. A lot of the times my MS does affect me physically sometimes, which makes it hard to do certain chores. And at the beginning, he was very aware of that and just handling honestly everything. And then I started to feel like I'm capable. Let me help. I don't want to just sit here and have everything done for me. I don't want you to pity me kind of thing. Yeah. And we just keep open lines of communication and I let him know if I think I'm overdoing it or if I need some help with chores or whatever. But we've gotten really good at understanding that while I was in my flare, things were really tough, but I'm in a much better place now. And I feel like I'm able to help and care for him in ways that I couldn't when we were really going through the diagnosis process. But I think it's all about checking in. Hey, are you good? Do you feel like you're overdoing it? How's your fatigue levels? How's your pain levels? Everything's a scale with us, like on a scale of 1 to 10. So that really helps.
Speaking of communicating how you feel, and you mentioned earlier that MS can present invisible and visible. Can you explain that a little bit more? Share if you'd like your personal experience or just in the communities or Reddit, what that means.
Yeah. So visible and invisible symptoms. I have mostly invisible symptoms, even though when I was first diagnosed, the balance stuff was very visible. But fatigue, numbness and tingling, brain fog, pain all over, just feels like you're being electrocuted sometimes. It's a really unpleasant feeling. And then anxiety and depression come with this diagnosis as well. So those are some of the more invisible symptoms. And then visible, it can affect speech, it can affect your gait, your walking, and it can affect your muscles and tremors. Those are some of the more progressed symptoms when you see folks in wheelchairs and whatnot. So it can be tough on both sides, but sometimes having the invisible symptoms, people will say things like, you don't look sick, or you look so great today. MS doesn't initially change how, like, your appearance initially. Sometimes it does. But yeah, folks say really interesting things.
That sounds like something frustrating to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. For example, in the summer months, I cannot deal with the heat. I have to wear an ice pack when I go on walks to regulate my temperature. And my neurologist said, we could get you a handicap pass so that when you're running errands, you could park closer to the stores so you're not overheating and dealing with those symptoms. But I just feel like I can't justify it yet, getting a handicap pass, because I know I'll get comments of people seeing me walking because I am able-bodied, but I do get exasperated by heat and I do experience a crazy flood, like a hot flash every time I am overheating, and I cannot regulate my temperature. It takes a while. So
Yeah. What do you think that is? That's something I'm hearing you say is this example of almost a need. I don't have the right word for it, but is the resistance the invisible appearance to the world of this beast?
absolutely. And I think the fear of confrontation and people seeing a young, able-bodied woman park in a handicapped spot and get out, and then being like, what? I have friends who have been approached and that have MS, and they're like, I have multiple sclerosis and that's why I have this, and it's not visible, but I have invisible symptoms that it takes a toll on me. So that's why I have this parking pass. But I think just the nerve of people to address that, and I'm like, I don't want to deal with that right now.
Yeah.
That's such a good comment for us to think about the judgmental rush. We might rush to judgment on people. That's a great reminder that we don't know.
You
no
never
idea what
know.
someone's
I
going
mean,
through.
I have a friend who had the same exact experience, and I was with her once when it happened. And I just remember thinking, people just fucking suck. There's no other feeling. And patient and gentle of you for even thinking of an explanation. We just flipped him off and kept it moving.
That sounds like her.
Very this person.
Yeah.
One thing that I talk about a lot in my teaching is certainty is correlated with inaccuracy.
Can you say that again? Slower for us in the back.
Certainty is correlated with inaccuracy. So the more certain these people are in the parking lot, they're terribly inaccurate.
I think that's just a
that's
broad
spot
statement
on.
for all of life. Like, how
All of
certain
life,
can you
yeah.
really be about anything? The more certain you are, probably the more inaccurate you are.
Yes.
Gosh, you shared with us about different ways you've experienced it. Marissa, do you work with people or alongside people that are newly learning that they have a chronic illness?
So through Hogue, there's something called the MS Hope Center. It's a support group. When folks are newly diagnosed, they like to connect people to folks that are diagnosed just so that they have someone to talk to. And so I've let my care team know that I am happy to be that person for anyone that is newly diagnosed and just wants to talk to someone that is going through it and can just listen to them and validate their experience and their fears, but also give them some hope.
How has that
So
been for you to do that?
Because I felt like I received so much support initially, I just wanted to be able to give that back to people, because this disease is such a beast and you have no control over it. And I just wanted to feel like I'm doing something to help move the needle, whether that's just encouraging another person fighting MS. That to me, it doesn't make it worth it, but it helps me find purpose in the process of dealing with this.
Let's talk about that newly diagnosed person. I'm guessing that's who would contact you. Is that right? The newly diagnosed person. Is it talking them through the stages of grief, like the disbelief, or is it all those things? Walk us through that conversation.
It can be. Oftentimes it's just tell me your story. Let's compare notes and share our symptoms and experience. And then honestly, it's what medication are you on? Who are your doctors? How are you dealing with this day to day? And of course, there's the emotional processing part and just validating that this sucks and you will get through it, but feel free to call me and vent and scream and we can curse at this beast together. And just being angry with them that they've had to join this club. I had so many people saying that to me and just validating this is the worst, especially for someone with anxiety. We all self-diagnose on Google. It's like your worst fear when a Google diagnosis comes true. And you're like, wow, I should not be receiving this diagnosis. What the heck? I was Googling this and joking that this could happen, and now we're here. And so just talking them through that and providing support. I'm here.
And what about the
So,
families? When a family is around someone who's newly diagnosed, what advice would you have for that family?
I would say just be patient and gracious with your loved one. They are grieving the life they thought they were going to have, and they feel like a burden. That was really big for me. I felt like such a burden because I knew not only am I going through this, but my whole family is going through this as well. And they're grieving the carefree Marissa they once knew. And so it's this weird dynamic of you're going through this grief, but then you're comforting your loved ones because they are so worried about you in that process. And they're also grieving you and what they were hopeful that your life would look like. And so I just tell family members to be patient, let them grieve, let them be angry, and just offer your love and support. And I would say, let the patient, the person with the chronic illness, let them lead. If they want to cry and curse and be angry, match that energy with them. If they just want to go out and have fun and they want to go to a concert and live their life, encourage them in those ways. There's people that can be overprotective and be like, oh, I like to say they're shoulding on you. Should you be doing that? Should you be going out to bars? You're just diagnosed with this thing. Should you go here, there, everywhere? If the person will tell you if they're not up for it. Like we talked about, this is a very present disease. It is day by day. And so if someone has the energy and they're up for it, support them in it. If they're not, support them in other ways. Go to their house, watch a movie, bring a meal, chill with them. Just let the person who's dealing with this new reality lead.
I think we've gone through a lot of things. One thing, I know we're talking in March about MS Awareness Month, but also for people to remember on the calendar, May 30th is World MS Day. What does this month and that day mean for you now?
Yeah. For me, World MS Day, it helps me feel seen and understood. I think it's really special that there's a day for everyone in the world to acknowledge that this is an experience that people are going through, and that there's communities out there that are doing as much as they can to find a cure and to provide resources to individuals and families that are facing this diagnosis. Yeah, it just makes me feel supported.
One, I just really appreciate your perspective on things. And I just want to take what you're going through and put it into practice in my own life, even though I'm not going through those things. Because I think it's really amazing that you can know yourself so well and know what is good for you today, may not be good for you tomorrow, and be in tune with yourself and then around your community as well, and advocate for yourself. So I really appreciate that. I think we can all practice that, even though we're not experiencing these same things. But for people who are dealing with chronic illness or MS, is there anything you want them particularly to know, or advice or just encouragement you have for them?
Yeah. I would say for people that are dealing with chronic illness, be honest about your feelings and your experience with the chronic illness. Live in your truth of what you're going through and don't feel pressured to be so strong and put on a brave face all the time. It's okay to just not be okay and not feel like you have to always be advocating because you want people to see you at your best. For a while, I was masking and trying so hard to make everyone around me comfortable because I knew we were all going through some type of grief with my diagnosis, and I couldn't mask it anymore. I just couldn't. And so letting people know I'm having a good day or I'm having a bad day with MS, and that's just my reality today. And not being afraid to do that. Advocate for yourself, speak up. I probably would have stayed with that worm brain diagnosis if I didn't push back and speak up. Everyone knows their own bodies best, and or say don't let anyone tell you your experience isn't valid. Don't let medical professionals gaslight you. Advocate for yourself. I would tell them to acknowledge the burden of the illness because it is a burden. You will see your life through that lens now forever, but know that It doesn't define you and you can rise above it. And then be kind to yourself, listen to your body, and allow yourself to recover at your own pace. I was so frustrated in the beginning because I am a runner and I couldn't run. I couldn't feel my foot as well as I used to. And my husband's like, oh, it's a little dangerous for you to be running like that. And so I was so mad at myself. And then I was like, you know what? I need to give myself grace and just pace myself. And I don't need to put these crazy expectations on myself with this illness. And so I would just encourage people to be patient with yourself and give yourself grace. A lot of dealing with a chronic illness is, I think, how you communicate with yourself and your own needs. And I think that has helped me navigate this whole process. So, yeah. And then I think for someone that doesn't have a chronic illness, that loves someone with a chronic illness, I would just say, please know that your loved one is doing their very best. They are doing their best while still trying to maintain every aspect of their life. And however you show up for them, whether that's funny text messages and memes. I love when people send me memes. It helps distract me from maybe what I'm dealing with that day, and just being supportive and offering your care to them.
You sound very wise.
Thank you, Dr. Kim.
Must have a good mentor.
Yeah.
I have a great mentor.
So just to wrap things up, are there any resources you would recommend for our listeners, and we could put them in the show notes?
Yeah, I could send a few resources, but the number one organization would be National MS Society. They have a ton of resources on their website, and they have nurse navigators and folks that are literally on call that you can chat with if you need any more information. They've been a huge resource to me. But I'll send over a few organizations that I think could be helpful to put in the show notes around MS.
Yeah. Great.
Gosh, thank you. Thank you for being vulnerable about something that's, I'm sure, as you described, a beast, and I'm sure has many fears and thoughts, and just to be able to put yourself out there with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me and for wanting to have this conversation. I think it's so important. There's so many people dealing with invisible battles, whether they're physical, mental, invisible, or visible. And just to bring awareness to it means a lot to me. So I really appreciate asking for a friend doing this.
We learned a lot. Once again, thank you for joining us today. Please remember to rate, share, and subscribe to our podcast. And thank you for listening to Asking for a Friend.
Let us know what you thought of the episode. Our email is hello@afafpodcast.com. This show is for educational purposes only and is copyrighted. Written permission must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting. Thanks for listening to Asking for a Friend with TalkDoc.